The stage rattled into Coldwater just after noon, wheels crunching over frozen mud and horse shit. Mara Vance climbed down before it fully stopped, her boots hitting the ground with the kind of certainty that came from having nowhere else to go. She was big, not tall, but solid, broad-shouldered, thick-waisted, the kind of woman who took up space and had spent a lifetime being punished for it. Her hands were scarred from hot stoves and sharp knives, her face weathered beyond her 32 years. She wore a man's coat because it was warmer, and her dark hair was pulled back in a braid that had gone messy somewhere between here and the last disappointment. Coldwater didn't look like much. A main street of mud and wooden sidewalks, buildings that leaned into the wind, windows that watched like suspicious eyes. The kind of town that decided who you were the moment you stepped off the stage. Mara had seen 100 towns like this. She'd been unwelcome in all of them. The driver tossed her bag down without looking at her. It landed in a half-frozen puddle. She picked it up, water soaking through the canvas, and didn't say a word. Complaining never changed anything. The hotel was first. It always was. Find a room, find work, find a way to eat. Simple math that somehow never added up. The clerk at the Goldstream Hotel looked her over with the expression of a man examining spoiled meat. Help you? Need a room, 2 nights to start. He didn't move. We're full. Mara glanced at the board behind him. 8 keys hanging on their hooks. You've got 8 rooms empty. Full, he repeated, his voice flatter now, harder. Try the boarding house on 5th. She held his eyes for a moment. Saw exactly what she always saw. That quick calculation, that instant judgment. Too big. Too rough. Too much. Women like her didn't stay in decent hotels. Women like her were the kind you didn't want other guests complaining about. Right, Mara said. 5th Street. The boarding house was worse. The woman who answered the door took one look and said, "No vacancies," before Mara could even speak. Sign out front says, I said no. The door closed. Mara stood there on the sagging porch, bag dripping at her feet, and felt the familiar weight settle over her shoulders. Not surprise. She was long past surprise. Just the grinding, exhausting knowledge that it was going to be like this. Again. She tried 2 more places. Got 2 more versions of the same answer. By the time the sun started dropping, she was standing outside Brennan's restaurant with her last hope running out. Through the window she could see white tablecloths and polished silverware, the kind of place that wanted to be fancy in a town that didn't quite know how. She pushed through the door. The warmth hit her first, then the smell. Roasted meat, butter, something with rosemary. Her stomach clenched. She'd eaten jerky and stale bread for 2 days. A thin man in a waistcoat appeared, his expression shifting from professional to dismissive in the space of a heartbeat. Kitchen entrance is around back. I'm looking for work, Mara said. I'm a cook. We're not hiring. Your sign says the position's been filled. He was lying. She could see it at the way his eyes slid away, in the tension around his mouth. But what could she do? Call him out? Demand fairness from a world that had never once been fair? I've worked kitchens from Denver to Sacramento, she said, keeping her voice level. I can do any station. I'm fast, I'm clean, and I don't cause problems. I'm sure you're very capable, he said, in a tone that said he was sure of no such thing. But as I said, the position is filled. Now, if you'll excuse me, who'd you hire? The question came out harder than she meant it to. The man's face tightened. I don't see how that's your concern. You hire someone today? I don't appreciate your tone. That's not an answer. His hand moved to the door, pulling it open. Cold air rushed in. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Mara didn't move. For just a moment, she let herself imagine it, grabbing his starched collar, telling him exactly what she thought of his polite lies, and his clean establishment, and his easy cruelty. But she'd learned that lesson the hard way in Butte, and the bruises had taken weeks to fade. She walked out, stood on the sidewalk as the door closed behind her with a clean, final click. The sun was nearly gone, temperature dropping fast. She had maybe $4 to her name and nowhere to sleep. Mara closed her eyes and did what she always did when the world squeezed too tight. She made a list. Not of what she'd lost or what had gone wrong, a list of what was still possible. 1. She could take the morning stage back east, use her last money for a ticket to somewhere else, start this whole thing over in a new town. 2. She could find a barn or a shed, ride out the night, look for day work in the morning. 3. She could walk into the nearest saloon, find the kind of work that was always available for women with no options left. She opened her eyes. There was a fourth option. She'd heard about it 3 towns back from a ranch hand who'd been passing through. The Walking H Ranch, he'd called it. Run by a man named Rowan Hale, tough as they came, out in the high country, about 8 miles west of Coldwater. They'd lost their cook 2 months back, and Hale was making do with whatever his crew could slap together. 8 miles, in the dark, in the cold. But out there, maybe her size wouldn't matter. Maybe what she could do would count for more than how she looked doing it. Maybe. Mara picked up her bag and started walking. The road west was more of a suggestion than an actual route. Frozen ruts and scattered stones, winding up through scrub pine and rocky slopes. The moon came up full and bright, which was the only mercy. That and the fact that anger kept her warm. She'd been angry for so long it felt like a second heartbeat. Angry at every door that closed, every job that went to someone prettier or smaller or more acceptable. Angry at the women who looked through her like she was furniture, at the men who looked at her like she was a problem to be solved or avoided. Angry at herself for still hoping, still trying, still believing that somewhere there had to be a place that would see what she could do instead of what she looked like doing it. The anger kept her feet moving even when her toes went numb. Around mile 4, she heard wolves, distant, somewhere up in the high rocks, but close enough to make her grip her bag tighter. She wasn't armed, hadn't been able to afford a gun since she'd pawned her last one in Cheyenne. She kept walking. Around mile 6, it started to snow. Of course it did. Fat, wet flakes that stuck to her coat and melted down her collar. Her breath came in white clouds. Her hands were so cold they'd stopped hurting, which she knew wasn't good. But turning back now would mean another night in cold water, and she'd rather freeze than go back to that town with nothing. The ranch appeared just when she'd started to think the hand had been lying. A collection of dark buildings hunched against the mountainside, smoke rising from a stone chimney. Barn, bunkhouse, main house, corrals with horses moving restlessly in the snow. Light in the windows. Mara stopped at the edge of the yard, suddenly uncertain. She'd come 8 miles on hope and spite. But hope had a way of curdling when you needed it most. The door to the main house opened before she could decide what to do. A man stood silhouetted against the light, tall and lean, a rifle cradled in one arm. "That's far enough," he called out. "State your business." His voice was rough, wary, not hostile yet, but not welcoming either. Mara set down her bag, raised her hands slightly, showing them empty. "Name's Mara Vance. I heard you need a cook." Silence. Then, "You walked here from town?" "Stage got in this afternoon. It's 8 miles." "I can count." Another pause. She could feel him looking at her, making his own calculations. Then he lowered the rifle slightly. "Come up to the porch, slow." She picked up her bag and crossed the yard. Up close, she could see him better, maybe 40, with a hard face and harder eyes, the kind of weathering that came from decades of sun and wind and disappointment. He wore range clothes, a sheepskin vest, boots that had seen serious miles. This was Rowan Hale. Had to be. "You always interview cooks at gunpoint?" Mara asked. "Only the ones who show up after dark in a snowstorm." He looked her over, his expression unreadable. "You really a cook?" 10 years, hotels, camps, private service. I can do anything from biscuits to beef Wellington, though I'm guessing you're not after the latter. Can you feed 12 men 3 times a day without poisoning them? I can feed 50 men 3 times a day and make them beg for seconds. Something flickered in his eyes. Might have been amusement. Might have been skepticism. Big talk. I don't deal in small talk. He studied her for another moment, then seemed to come to some decision. Wait here. He disappeared back into the house. Mara stood on the porch, snow gathering on her shoulders, and tried not to let hope do its traitorous work. Getting her expectations up now would only make the fall worse. Rowan returned with a lamp and a coat that he shrugged into as he walked past her. Come on. She followed him across the yard to a building she hadn't noticed before, smaller than the bunkhouse, set slightly apart. He unlocked the door and held up the lamp. It was a kitchen, a real one. Cast iron stove, solid and well-maintained. a long wooden table scarred with knife marks and burns, shelves lined with dry goods, flour, beans, sugar, salt, coffee, a cold box built into the north wall, pots and pans hanging from hooks, a cleaver, a good set of knives. Mara's hands itched to touch it all. Last cook quit after a pay dispute, Rowan said. Been 2 months. The men are eating beans and bad bacon, and morale's in the dirt. I need someone who can turn out decent food without drama. Can you do that? Yes? You running from something? The question caught her off guard. She turned to look at him. Why do you ask? Because people don't walk 8 miles in the snow for a job unless they're desperate or desperate. Which is it? Mara met his eyes and decided truth was cheaper than lies. Cold Water wasn't interested in hiring me. I had nowhere else to go. Why weren't they interested? She almost laughed. Look at me. Rowan did. His gaze was direct, assessing, but not cruel, not dismissive. He was looking at her the way he might look at a horse he was considering, checking for soundness, for capability, for whether she could do the job. I'm looking, he said. I see someone who walked 8 miles to ask for work. That tells me more than what you look like. Something tight in Mara's chest loosened just slightly. The job's a trial, Rowan continued. 1 week. You cook, you keep the kitchen clean, you stay out of the crew's business, you do good work. The job's yours permanent. You don't. You get wages for the week and a ride back to town. That fair? That's fair. Wages are $30 a month plus room and board. You sleep in the back room there. He nodded toward a door at the rear of the kitchen. Meals are sunrise, noon, and sundown. You need supplies, you tell me. You have problems with any of the men, you tell me. Understood? Understood. Ooh, breakfast is at 5:30. That gives you tonight to settle in and tomorrow to prove you can do what you say. He handed her the lamp. Don't make me regret this. He left before she could respond. Mara stood alone in the kitchen, lamp in hand, and let herself breathe. The back room was small, a cot, a trunk, a washstand, a tiny stove for heat. Spartan, cold, about as welcoming as a jail cell. It was the best thing she'd seen in months. She dropped her bag on the cot and went back to the kitchen. It was late, she was exhausted, but she needed to understand what she was working with before morning came. The stove was good quality, well seasoned. The knives were decent, not great, but she could sharpen them. The dry goods were basic but adequate. Flour, cornmeal, beans, rice, dried apples, coffee, sugar, salt, pepper, lard. In the cold box, she found eggs, bacon, a side of beef that needed using soon, butter going rancid. She made notes in her head. Inventory. Possibilities. Then she found the sourdough starter. It was in a crock on the shelf, neglected and nearly dead, but there was still a layer of hooch on top and a sour smell when she opened it. Someone had started this and then abandoned it. Mara felt something like affection for that forgotten crock. She fed it, stirred in flour and water, covered it again, set it somewhere warm. It might come back, it might not, but you had to try. By the time she finally lay down on the cot, still in her clothes, too tired to even take off her boots, the sky outside was beginning to lighten. She closed her eyes. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't dream about running. The crew filed in at 5:30 exactly, stomping snow off their boots, smelling like horses, and cold and hard work. 12 men, just like Rowan had said, young and old, scarred and weathered, all of them looking like they'd been carved out of the same tough material as the mountains around them. They stopped when they saw her. Mara was at the stove, flipping flapjacks on the griddle, bacon sizzling in the pan beside it. The table was set with plates and mugs, a pot of coffee already steaming. Morning, she said, not looking up. Sit down, food's ready. Nobody moved. One of them, older, with a gray beard and a limp, finally spoke. Where's Hale? Eating with you, I'd imagine. I'm Mara. I'm your cook. Now sit down before everything gets cold. Still they hesitated. She could feel them looking at her, doing their own calculations. She kept her attention on the griddle. Finally, the bearded man took a seat. The others followed, the scrape of chairs filling the silence. Mara brought the flapjacks over, stacked high on a platter. Then the bacon, crisp and perfect. Then a bowl of stewed apples she'd thrown together from the dried fruit, sweetened with a little sugar and cinnamon she'd found in the back of the cupboard. She poured coffee and stepped back. Eat. They ate. At first there was just the sound of forks and knives, men too hungry or too suspicious to talk. But after the first few bites, something shifted. Shoulders relaxed. Someone made a sound that might have been approval. The bearded man looked up at her. "This is good." "It's breakfast," Mara said. "Nothing fancy." "It's better than anything we've had in 2 months." Another man, younger, with a scar across his jaw, reached for seconds. "You make these flapjacks from scratch?" "I don't make them from wishes." A couple of them actually smiled at that. Rowan came in just as they were finishing, shaking snow from his hat. He looked at the table, at the empty platters, at the men scraping their plates clean. "Decent?" he asked the crew. "Better than decent," the bearded man said. "She can cook." Rowan's eyes found Mara. He didn't smile, but there was something in his expression that might have been satisfaction. "Good. Don't get comfortable. She's on trial." He took a seat at the head of the table, and Mara brought him a plate. He ate in silence, his face giving away nothing. When he was done, he stood. "You all have work. Get to it." The crew filed out, a few of them nodding to Mara as they passed. The bearded man stopped at the door. "Name's Briggs. That was a fine breakfast, ma'am. Hope you stick around." Then she was alone with the dirty dishes and the cold morning light and the knowledge that she'd bought herself another day. She cleaned everything until it shone, scrubbed the stove, scoured the pots, washed and dried every plate and mug. She made bread dough and set it to rise. She took stock of what she'd need for the noon meal and started a stew with the beef and some vegetables she'd found in the root cellar. By mid-morning, her back ached and her hands were raw, but the kitchen smelled like rising bread and simmering broth, and it felt like the first honest work she'd done in months. She was rolling out biscuits when Rowan came back. "Crew's talking," he said without preamble. "They want to know if you're staying. I've got 6 more days of trial." "I'm aware. I'm asking what you want." Mara looked at him, at his hard face and unreadable eyes, and the question that might have been the closest thing to kindness she'd been offered in a long time. "I want to stay." "Then don't mess it up." He left again, and Mara went back to her biscuits, pressing the cutter down with more force than necessary, her jaw tight. Don't mess it up. Simple advice. The same advice she'd been giving herself for years. Just this time, maybe, she'd actually manage it. 3 days in, she had names for all of them. Briggs, the old cowhand with the limp and the dry humor. Carter, the young one with the scar, eager and restless. Miller, who was built like a bull and had hands the size of dinner plates. Temple, quiet and watchful, who fixed things without being asked. Sykes, who told stories that were mostly lies and didn't care who knew it. And on, 12 men who were starting to look at her like she might be permanent, who lingered after meals to talk or to ask if she needed anything from town. She kept her distance, friendly enough to avoid problems, cold enough to avoid misunderstandings. She'd learned that lesson too. Men who got too comfortable started thinking they had rights to things that weren't theirs. But they were good workers, and they were hungry, and that made her job simple. Keep them fed, keep them happy, stay out of everything else. On the 4th morning, Carter came in limping. "What happened?" Mara asked, setting down her spatula. "Turned my ankle in a rut. It's nothing." "Sit down." "I can sit down." He sat. Mara knelt and unlaced his boot, feeling along the swelling. He hissed when she hit the sore spot. "Not broken," she said, "but you need to stay off it today. I'll wrap it." Rowan will deal with me. Stay here." She found clean cloth in her room, came back and wrapped his ankle tight and competent. She'd done this before. Kitchens were dangerous places. Burns, cuts, twisted joints. You learned basic field medicine or you didn't last. When she finished, Carter was looking at her with something like wonder. "Thank you, ma'am." "It's Mara, and you're welcome. Now eat something and then get off that foot." Rowan came in while Carter was still sitting there, boot off, ankle wrapped. "He hurt?" "Turned ankle," Mara said. "He needs light duty today." Rowan looked at Carter, then at Mara. "You a cook or a doctor?" "I'm whatever keeps your crew working." For the first time since she'd met him, Rowan smiled. It was brief, barely there, but real. "Fair enough. Carter, you're on tack repair today. Stay in the barn." After the crew left, Rowan lingered. Mara started clearing plates, waiting for whatever he'd come to say. "They like you," he said finally. "They like eating. It's more than that. Briggs said you're the best thing that's happened to this place in a year." "Briggs talks too much." "Maybe, but he's not wrong." Rowan picked up a mug, turned it in his hands. "Your trial's up tomorrow. I'm making the job permanent if you want it." Mara stopped mid-motion, dish in hand. "I want it." "Then it's yours. Same terms. 30 a month, room and board, you answer to me." "Understood." He set down the mug and headed for the door, then stopped. "Mara." "Yeah?" "Coldwater's loss is my gain. Whatever they saw when they looked at you, I see someone who does her job and doesn't quit. That's worth a hell of a lot more than pretty." He left before she could respond. Mara stood there holding a dirty dish, something strange and unfamiliar rising in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as pride. The trouble started the following week, when she went to town for supplies. She'd been putting it off, hoping Rowan would send someone else. But he made it clear. She knew what the kitchen needed. She should be the one to get it. So she took the wagon and rode into Coldwater with a list and a sense of dread that proved entirely justified. The mercantile was run by a thin, pinched woman named Mrs. Coyle, who looked at Mara like she'd tracked in something foul. "Yes? I need supplies for the walking H." Mrs. Coyle's expression tightened. "You work out there?" "I'm the cook." "I see." She said it the way you'd say, "I see you have cholera." "What do you need?" Mara handed over the list. Mrs. Coyle read it with pursed lips, then set it down. "This is quite a lot. It's a working ranch. Men eat. I'll need to check our stock." She disappeared into the back room. Mara waited, aware of other customers watching her. A young woman with a baby. 2 men in clean shirts, all of them staring. Mrs. Coyle returned empty-handed. "I'm afraid we don't have most of these items." "You don't have flour?" "Not in the quantity you're requesting. The sign out front says you're a mercantile. You're telling me you don't stock basic supplies?" "I'm telling you we don't have what you need today. Perhaps if you come back next week." "I need it today." Mrs. Coyle's smile was thin and sharp. "Then perhaps you should try elsewhere." There was nowhere else. Coldwater had one mercantile, one hotel, one of everything, and everyone in the room knew it. Mara felt the old anger rising, hot and familiar. But losing her temper would only make things worse. It always did. "How much do you have?" "I'm sorry?" "Flour. How much do you have in stock?" Mrs. Coyle hesitated, trapped by her own lie. "Perhaps 20 pounds. "I'll take it. And whatever else on this list you can actually provide." It took an hour and cost twice what it should have, but Mara walked out with half of what she needed, and the knowledge that this was going to be a problem, a continuing problem. Mrs. Coyle had made it clear without saying it directly. Mara wasn't welcome to shop there, wasn't welcome in town, and the walking H could expect difficulties as long as she was working there. She loaded the wagon in silence while people watched from windows and doorways. Not one person spoke to her. Not one person offered help. She was halfway back to the ranch when she realized she was crying. Not sobbing, just tears running hot down her cold face, angry and ashamed at being angry. She wiped them away roughly and kept driving. By the time she reached the ranch, she'd made a decision. She found Rowan in the barn, checking on a mare with a swollen hock. "We need to talk." He straightened, reading her face. "What happened?" "Mrs. Coyle at the mercantile. She wouldn't sell me half of what we need, made excuses, inflated prices, made it clear I'm not welcome." "Because?" "Because I'm me. Because the town's decided I don't belong, and they're going to make that everyone's problem." Rowan's jaw tightened. "What do you need?" "I need to know if you're going to back me up or if I should start packing." The question came out harder than she meant it to, but she was done with soft. Done with hoping people would be decent when they'd already shown her who they were. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. "I hired you to cook. You're doing that job better than anyone has in years. What Coldwater thinks about it isn't my concern, and it shouldn't be yours. You need supplies. I'll ride in with you next time. Anyone gives you trouble, they're giving me trouble. Clear?" "Clear." "Good. Now let's see what you managed to get and figure out how to stretch it." They walked back to the wagon together, and Mara felt some of the tightness in her chest ease. Not all of it. The anger was still there. The hurt was still there. But she wasn't alone with it anymore. That night at dinner, she served thin stew and biscuits made with cornmeal instead of flour. The crew ate without complaint, but she could see them noticing. After the meal, Briggs stayed behind. Word is Mrs. Coyle gave you trouble. Word travels fast. Always does. For what it's worth, she's a miserable old bat who wouldn't know quality if it bit her. You're doing fine work here, Mara. Don't let them run you off. I don't plan to. Good. He limped toward the door, then stopped. But watch yourself in town. The Coyles have friends, and people here don't like their world getting shaken up. He left her with that warning, and Mara cleaned the kitchen in silence, her hands moving automatically while her mind worked. She'd faced hostility before, had weathered worse than Coldwater's petty cruelty, but something about this felt different, sharper, more organized. She thought about Mrs. Coyle's tight smile, about the people watching from windows, about the way the whole town had seemed to know she was unwelcome before she'd even knocked on a door. Someone was spreading the word, making sure she stayed unwanted. The question was, who? And more importantly, why did they care enough to bother? Mara hung up her apron and locked the kitchen door. Tomorrow she'd make bread from what little flour she had left. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to feed 12 men on scraps and determination. Tomorrow she'd keep fighting. Tonight she just needed to sleep. But as she lay in her narrow bed, listening to the wind rattle the windows, she couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. Coldwater had barely started with her yet. The bread lasted 3 days. On the fourth morning, Mara served cornmeal mush and bacon and watched the crew's faces as they tried not to show disappointment. Supplies still short? Briggs asked quietly. Getting there. You need someone to ride to town with you? Rowan's handling it. But Rowan was gone. Had been for 2 days, riding fence lines in the north pasture. When he got back that evening, mud-splattered and exhausted, Mara cornered him before he could escape to the main house. We're out of flour, nearly out of sugar. Coffee's running low. He pulled off his gloves, jaw tight. I'll take you tomorrow. They won't sell to me even if you're standing there. Then they won't sell to me either, and we'll see how that sits with their ledger. He meant it. She could see that much. But Mara had learned a long time ago that good intentions didn't count for much against organized resistance. Still, the next morning they rode into Coldwater together, the wagon rattling over frozen ground, neither of them talking. Rowan's presence was solid beside her, his rifle resting across his knees in a way that wasn't quite threatening, but wasn't quite friendly either. The mercantile was busier this time. 6 customers browsing shelves, Mrs. Coyle behind the counter with her pinched smile already in place. That smile faltered when she saw Rowan. Mr. Hale. What a surprise. Need supplies, Rowan said, handing over Mara's list without preamble. Full order this time. Mrs. Coyle's eyes flicked to Mara, then back to the paper. Of course. Though I'm afraid some of these items are in your storeroom, Rowan interrupted. Same as they were last week when you told Mara you didn't have them. So let's not play that game. The other customers had gone quiet, watching. Mr. Hale, I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate being lied to. You've got flour. You've got sugar. You've got everything on that list because I saw the delivery wagon here 3 days ago. Now you can sell them to us at fair price, or I can take my business to Millerville and let everyone in this room know why. Mrs. Coyle's face went red. That's hardly necessary. Then fill the order. For a moment, Mara thought the woman might refuse anyway. But Rowan's reputation carried weight that hers didn't, and Mrs. Coyle wasn't quite ready to lose the Walking H's business entirely. Fine, it'll take a few minutes to gather everything. We'll wait. They waited in silence that felt like glass about to break. The other customers drifted away one by one, leaving sideways glances and whispered words in their wake. Mrs. Coyle took her time, disappearing into the back room, emerging with bags and tins that she counted out with deliberate slowness. When she finally tallied the bill, the prices were still high. Not as inflated as before, but enough to sting. Rowan paid without arguing and carried the supplies out himself, loading them into the wagon with controlled movements that said more than words about how angry he actually was. They were almost out of town when a man stepped into the street in front of them. He was perhaps 60, well-dressed in a dark suit that looked out of place against Coldwater's rough edges. His hair was silver, his face lined but handsome in that way powerful men often were. Everything about him said money and authority. Rowan pulled the wagon to a stop. "Warren." "Rowan." The man's voice was smooth, cultured. "I heard you were in town. Thought I'd save you a trip to the bank. Wasn't planning one." "No? That's unfortunate. We really should discuss your account. You're coming up on renewal for your operating loan." "Not for another 6 months." "True. But given some recent concerns, I thought it prudent to have a conversation sooner rather than later." Beside Rowan, Mara felt the tension ratchet up. "What concerns?" Rowan asked, his voice carefully flat. Warren's eyes shifted to Mara, assessing her with the cold precision of a banker calculating risk. "I understand you've made some staffing changes. Hired a cook. That's not bank business." "Everything that affects the ranch's reputation affects its creditworthiness. And I've heard troubling reports about your new employee's conduct in town." Mara's hands tightened on the wagon seat. "Her conduct," Rowan said, "has been faultless. What you've heard is gossip from people who don't like how she looks. If that's what the bank bases credit decisions on now, I'll take my business elsewhere." Warren smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Now, Rowan, there's no need for hostility. I'm simply doing my due diligence. A ranch is only as good as the men who run it, and the people they associate with. You understand that, surely?" "What I understand is that you're threatening me over a cook who hasn't done anything wrong." "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm offering friendly advice. The community has standards. When those standards are violated, consequences follow. Better to address these issues early than to let them fester." Rowan leaned forward slightly. "Here's some friendly advice for you, Aldrich. Stay out of my hiring decisions. I run the walking H, not you, and not Coldwater. If you've got a problem with how I do business, put it in writing and send it with the bank's official seal. Otherwise, get out of my way." For a moment, Warren's mask slipped. Mara saw real anger there, hard and cold. Then the smile returned. "As you wish. But do think carefully, Rowan. Pride is expensive, sometimes more than a man can afford." He stepped aside. Rowan snapped the reins and the wagon lurched forward. They were a mile out of town before either of them spoke. "Who was that?" Mara asked. "Aldrich Warren. Owns the bank, half the businesses in Coldwater, and thinks he owns everything else by default. He's been trying to buy the Walking H for 5 years. You won't sell. Not to him, not to anyone." Rowan's knuckles were white on the reins. "Place has been in my family for 30 years. My father built it from nothing. I'll be damned if I let some banker with delusions of empire take it from me." "He threatened you because of me?" "He threatened me because he's been looking for an excuse. You're just convenient." Rowan glanced at her. "Don't take it personal. To men like Warren, everyone's either a tool or an obstacle. Right now, you're an obstacle he thinks he can use to get to me. What happens when he realizes he can't? Then things get interesting." That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Back at the ranch, Mara threw herself into work. She baked bread until the kitchen smelled like heaven. She made stew that could stick to ribs in a blizzard. She turned out biscuits and pies and roasts that had the crew singing her praises at every meal. But the shadow of Aldrich Warren hung over everything. 2 weeks after the confrontation, their supply deliveries stopped. Rowan rode to town and came back tight-lipped. Warren bought the freight company. New owner says they're too busy to service the ranch. Can he do that? He just did. A week later, the blacksmith refused to shoe their horses. Said his schedule was full, maybe try again in a month. 2 days after that, the feed supplier announced a sudden price increase just for the Walking H. Warren was squeezing them, slow and methodical, using his money and influence to cut off their access to everything Coldwater had to offer. "We can't keep going like this," Mara said one evening, after serving a dinner made from what little they'd managed to scrounge. "We need those supplies." "I know. So what do we do?" Rowan looked at her across the table, his face haggard in the lamplight. "We adapt, find new suppliers, haul our own freight, make do with what we can produce ourselves. That'll take time we might not have. You got a better idea?" She didn't. That was the problem. The crew felt it too, the pressure building, the tightening screws. They worked harder, complained less, but Mara could see the worry creeping in. Men who relied on wages couldn't afford to work for a ranch that might not survive. One night, Carter approached her after dinner, hat in his hands. "Ma'am, Mara, I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Is it true you're the reason all this is happening? The supply problems? Warren coming down on us?" The question hit harder than it should have. "Warren's doing this because he wants the ranch." "I'm just his excuse." "That's what Rowan says. But the thing is," Carter looked miserable. "My sister works at the hotel. She says people in town are saying you brought this on us, that you're trouble, and we'd be better off without you." "Do you believe that?" "I don't know what to believe. All I know is before you came we had problems, but we managed. Now it feels like we're one bad month from losing everything." Mara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You want me to leave." "I want things to go back to normal." "They won't. Warren's not going to stop just because I'm gone. He'll find another excuse, another pressure point. That's what men like him do." Carter shifted his weight, still not meeting her eyes. "Maybe. But maybe it's worth trying." He left before she could respond. Mara sat alone in the kitchen, listening to the silence, and felt the old familiar weight pressing down. How many times had she been here? How many times had she been the problem people wanted solved by her absence? She could leave. Pack her things, take whatever wages Rowan owed her, disappear before things got worse. It would be easier, cleaner. She was used to running, but something had changed. For the first time in her life, she had something worth fighting for. Not just a job, but respect. A place where her work mattered. Men who'd learned to see her as more than the sum of other people's judgments. And Rowan. Rowan who'd stood beside her in that mercantile, who'd faced down Warren without flinching, who told her that what Coldwater thought didn't matter. She couldn't walk away from that. She wouldn't. The next morning, she found Rowan in the barn. "Carter talked to you?" he asked before she could speak. "Last night." "He talked to you too?" "This morning. Told him if he's looking for someone to blame, he can blame Warren, or he can blame me, but either way, he's still got a job to do." Rowan's expression was grim. "I won't fire you, Mara. I don't care what the crew thinks or what Warren does. You've earned your place here." "That's not what I came to say." "Then what?" "I came to say I'm staying, and I'm done letting Warren dictate the terms." She met his eyes. "You said we adapt, so let's adapt. But let's do it in a way that shows Coldwater we're not afraid of them." Something shifted in Rowan's face. "What did you have in mind?" "The county fair is in 3 weeks. There's a cooking competition. You want to enter." "I want to win. In front of the whole county, on their turf. Let them see exactly what they've been trying to drive out." Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. A real smile, sharp and fierce. "That'll make them mad." "Good. I'm tired of being polite." The county fair was the biggest event of the season. 3 days of livestock shows, rodeos, pie contests, and posturing. Coldwater's chance to show off for the smaller towns and ranches scattered across the territory. The cooking competition was a centerpiece, judged by the mayor and 2 visiting restaurant owners from Helena. Entry fee was $5. Prize was $50, and a ribbon that meant bragging rights for the year. Mara had never cared about bragging rights in her life, but she cared about this. She spent the next 2 weeks planning, not just what to cook, but how to cook it. What would make an impact? What would be undeniable? She settled on beef Wellington, not because it was easy, but because it was the kind of dish that separated real cooks from pretenders. Tender beef wrapped in mushroom duxelles and puff pastry, served with a wine reduction that required precision and timing, and skill most people didn't have. It was showy, difficult, and exactly the kind of thing no one would expect from a ranch cook. Perfect. The crew watched her practice runs with a mixture of awe and concern. "That's a lot of butter," Miller observed, watching her work the pastry dough. "That's what makes it good." "What if you don't win?" "Then I don't win, but they'll remember what they saw." Briggs lingered after one dinner, watching her prep. "You know Warren's going to be at the fair. He's on the town council, has a say in the judging." "I know." "So you're walking into a stacked deck." "Story of my life." He chuckled at that, low and rough. "You got sand, Mara. I'll give you that." The night before the fair, Rowan found her in the kitchen, still working. "You should rest." "I'll rest when it's done." He pulled up a chair, sitting backward on it, arms crossed over the back. Why does this matter so much to you? Mara kept her hands moving, rolling pastry with steady pressure. You really want to know? I wouldn't ask if I didn't. She was quiet for a moment, measuring her words. Every town I've ever been in, people look at me and decide I'm not worth their time. They don't see what I can do. They just see what I look like and decide that's all there is to know. I'm tired of it. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being dismissed. You're not invisible here. I know. That's why this matters. Because for the first time, I've got something to lose. A place that actually feels like it could be home. And I'll be damned if I let Warren or Coldwater or anyone else take that from me without a fight. Rowan was quiet, studying her in the lamplight. Then he stood. Win or lose, you've got a home here, long as you want it. He left her alone with that promise, and Mara went back to work with hands that were steadier than they'd been in weeks. The fairground sprawled across a wide meadow just outside Coldwater, a chaos of tents and corrals and banners snapping in the wind. By mid-morning, it seemed like half the territory had shown up, ranchers and farmers, families with children, gamblers and grifters looking for easy marks. Mara arrived with Rowan and 3 of the crew, her beef already prepped and packed in the wagon. The cooking competition was scheduled for 2 o'clock, giving her time to set up in the competitor's tent and get a feel for what she was up against. Turned out she was up against 12 other entries, most of them women in clean aprons and confident smiles. They looked at her when she walked in, and she watched the familiar calculation happen in real time. One of them, a blonde woman in her 30s with perfect posture, actually laughed. Are you lost? Nope, I'm competing. In the cooking competition? That's generally what happens when you register for a cooking competition. The woman exchanged glances with her neighbor. Well, this should be interesting. Mara found her station and started unpacking. She could feel them watching, whispering, making their judgments. Let them. They'd see soon enough. At 1:30, the judges arrived. Mayor Hutchins, a florid man who liked the sound of his own voice, and 2 restaurant owners from Helena, whose names Mara didn't catch. And beside them, like a shadow in expensive clothes, Aldrich Warren. He saw her immediately. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Calculation. Threat. Mayor Hutchins called the competitors to attention, laying out the rules. Each entrant would present their dish at their station. Judges would taste and score based on presentation, flavor, and technique. Decision would be final. And let's keep this friendly, folks, Hutchins added with a politician's smile. This is about celebrating our community's finest. The finest being anyone who fit Coldwater's narrow definition, Mara thought. But she kept her face neutral. At 2 o'clock, they began. Mara worked with the focus that came from years of professional kitchens. She seared her beef, prepared her duxelles, rolled her pastry. Around her, the other competitors worked on their entries, roasted chicken, elaborate pies, crown roasts, fancy salads. All of it good. None of it great. She could feel people gathering outside the tent, drawn by the smell and the spectacle. Could hear the murmur of voices, some curious, some already dismissive. By 3:30, her Wellington was done. Golden pastry, pink center, reduction glossy and perfect. She plated it with care, added a garnish of fresh herbs, and stepped back. It was the best thing she'd ever made. The judges made their rounds. Mara watched them taste each dish, saw the polite nods and scribbled notes. When they reached the blonde woman's entry, a crown roast with glazed vegetables, there were actual smiles. Then they reached Mara's station. Mayor Hutchins looked at the Wellington, then at her. This is quite ambitious. It's beef Wellington, not rocket science. Warren stepped closer, his expression unreadable. Where did a ranch cook learn to make something like this? Same place anyone learns anything. Practice. One of the Helena restaurateurs cut into the pastry, examining the layers. Then he tasted it. His eyebrows went up. He took another bite, slower this time. Then he looked at his colleague. You need to try this. The second restaurateur did. His reaction was similar, surprise, followed by something that looked like genuine appreciation. Mayor Hutchins tasted next. His face showed nothing, but Mara saw his jaw tighten. Warren didn't taste it, just stood there watching her with those cold banker's eyes. After the judges moved on, Mara exhaled slowly. She'd done her part. Now it was out of her hands. The deliberation took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of standing in the tent while the other competitors whispered and the crowd outside grew restless. Mara's hands were shaking. She clasped them behind her back and waited. Finally, Mayor Hutchins emerged. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our winners. Third place goes to Mrs. Eleanor March for her apple crumb pie." Polite applause. Eleanor beamed, accepting her ribbon. Second place goes to Mrs. Patricia Greenwood for her crown roast. More applause. Patricia, the blonde, smiled graciously, but Mara could see the tension around her eyes. She'd expected first. Hutchins paused, letting the moment stretch. "And first place goes to—" He looked directly at Mara. His expression was sour, like he'd bitten into something rotten. "Miss Mara Vance, for her beef Wellington." The tent went silent. Then one person started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the applause was real, genuine, coming from people who'd tasted what she'd made and couldn't deny it. Mara walked forward on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Hutchins handed her the ribbon and the prize money with a handshake that lasted exactly 1 second. "Congratulations," he said, his voice flat. "Thank you." She turned to face the crowd and saw Rowan standing at the edge of the tent, grinning like a kid at Christmas. Behind him, Briggs and Carter and Miller were whooping loud enough to scare the horses. And beyond them, Aldrich Warren stood watching with a face like carved stone. Mara held up her ribbon. Let them see it. Let them see her. She'd won. The celebration back at the ranch that night was rowdy and genuine. The crew broke out whiskey they'd been saving, toasted her until their voices went hoarse. Someone produced a fiddle and they had music, actual dancing, the kind of joy that came from a victory earned against impossible odds. Mara sat on the porch steps with her ribbon in her hand and watched them, feeling something warm and unfamiliar spreading through her chest. "You did good," Rowan said, settling beside her with his own glass. "We'll pay for it." "Probably, but it was worth it." He clinked his glass against hers. "You showed them you can't be pushed around. That matters." "Does it?" "Warren's still out there, still angry, probably more angry now." "Let him be angry. We'll deal with whatever comes." Mara looked at him in the firelight, at his hard face and harder eyes that somehow held kindness anyway. "Why do you care?" she asked. "Really? You could have avoided all this by not hiring me, by sending me back to town that first night. Why didn't you?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment. "Because I know what it's like to be judged for the wrong reasons," he said finally. "My father was a drunk and a failure. People in Coldwater never let me forget it. Spent years proving I wasn't him, that I could build something worth having." He turned to look at her. "When you walked up that road in the snow, I saw someone doing the same thing. Figured you deserved a chance. Same as I got." "That's it?" "That's it." He stood, offering her a hand up. "Come on, your crew wants to dance with the champion." She let him pull her to her feet, and for a few hours, she let herself forget about Warren and consequences and the price that would inevitably come due. For a few hours, she just let herself win. But 3 days later, the bill arrived. It came in an envelope, hand-delivered by a kid from town who wouldn't meet Rowan's eyes. Official bank stationery, Warren's signature at the bottom in precise black ink. Rowan read it twice, his face going darker with each pass. "What is it?" Mara asked from the kitchen doorway. He handed it to her without a word. The letter was polite, professional, and devastating. Warren was calling in the operating loan, 60 days to repay in full, or face foreclosure. The amount made Mara's stomach drop. $12,000. More money than she'd seen in her entire life. "Can he do this?" she asked. "Legally?" "Yeah. The loan terms give the bank discretion to call it early if they perceive increased risk to repayment." Rowan's voice was flat, controlled in a way that meant he was furious. "Practically, it's a death sentence. No way we can raise that kind of cash in 2 months. There has to be something, but there's nothing. Cattle prices are down, we won't turn a profit on the herd until spring, and every bank within 100 miles knows Warren's got us by the throat. Nobody's going to lend against a foreclosure." He crumpled the letter in his fist. "He's got us." Mara felt the old guilt rising, thick and familiar. "This is because of me, because I won that competition. This is because Warren's a vindictive bastard who can't stand losing." Rowan threw the wadded paper across the room. "But yeah, you winning didn't help. Made him look weak in front of the whole county. Men like him don't forgive that. Then I'll leave. Maybe if I'm gone, he'll still call the loan. You leaving doesn't change the fact that I defied him, that I chose you over his approval. Rowan's eyes were hard. And I'm not asking you to run. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? I don't know yet, but I'll figure something out. He walked out before she could respond, shoulders rigid with an anger he had nowhere to put. Mara stood in the kitchen holding that crumpled letter, feeling the weight of consequences she'd known were coming, but had hoped might somehow pass them by. She'd been naive. In her whole life, consequences had never passed her by. The crew found out by evening. News like that traveled fast in close quarters. They gathered in the bunkhouse after dinner, and Mara could hear the low rumble of their voices through the walls. Worried voices, angry voices, scared voices. She didn't blame them. Most of these men had nowhere else to go. The Walking H wasn't just a job. It was stability, wages, a place to sleep. If the ranch went under, they'd be scattered to wherever they could find work, and in winter that meant slim pickings. Briggs came to the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed. We're having a meeting tomorrow morning, before breakfast. Thought you should know. A meeting about what? About what happens next, whether we stick or whether we start looking for new positions while there's still time. And what do you think will happen? The old cowhand leaned against the doorframe, his face tired. I think most of them will stick. These are good men, loyal men. But loyalty don't pay debts, and some of them have families to think about. Can't fault a man for looking after his own. No, Mara agreed quietly. You can't. For what it's worth, I'm staying. Been with Rowan since his father died. Not about to abandon him now. Briggs met her eyes. You staying too? Where else would I go? Fair point. He pushed off the doorframe. Get some sleep, Mara. Tomorrow's going to be rough. He was right about that. The meeting happened in the barn at dawn, all 12 men standing in a rough circle with Rowan at the center. Mara watched from the kitchen window, close enough to see their faces but too far to hear the words. She could tell how it was going by their postures. The way shoulders straightened when Rowan spoke, the way heads nodded or shook, the way Carter kept looking at the ground. After 20 minutes, they dispersed. Most headed for the bunkhouse. 3, Carter among them, went to the barn to collect their gear. Rowan came to the kitchen an hour later. Lost 3, he said without preamble. Carter, Jensen, and Polk. Can't blame them. They've got better options than going down with this ship. I'm sorry. Don't be. Like I said, can't blame them. He poured himself coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. The rest are staying, at least for now. Briggs convinced them to give me time to find a solution, but time's the one thing we don't have. What about selling cattle early? Thought of that. Even if we sold the whole herd tomorrow, which we can't, not in winter, we'd get maybe 8,000. Still 4,000 short, and then we'd have nothing to build back from. He drank his coffee in silence for a moment. I've been running numbers all night. Every scenario ends the same way. We're done. Mara had never heard him sound defeated before. It was worse than his anger. There has to be something, she said. Some asset we're not seeing. The land's worth plenty, but Warren won't accept that as payment. He wants foreclosure so he can buy it for pennies on the dollar. Equipment's old. Buildings are falling apart. We've got nothing he wants except failure. Then we don't give it to him. How? With what money? Mara didn't have an answer. She went back to kneading bread dough, hands working automatically while her mind spun through useless possibilities. The morning stretched into afternoon. Rowan disappeared to ride fence lines, not because they needed riding, but because he needed to move. Mara cooked for 9 men instead of 12 and felt the absence like missing teeth. That evening, a rider came up the road. Mara saw him from the kitchen window, a young man in town clothes picking his way carefully up the frozen track. He tied his horse and knocked on the main house door, emerged 5 minutes later and rode off just as carefully. Rowan appeared in the kitchen doorway holding another envelope. Warren's generosity knows no bounds, he said, voice dripping sarcasm. He's willing to buy the ranch outright, offered me $5,000 for the whole property. That's about a quarter of what it's worth, yeah. Plus, he's graciously agreed to let me stay on as foreman at reduced wages. Rowan's laugh was bitter. He gets everything he wanted, and I get to keep working the land my family built, only now I do it for him. Isn't that kind? You can't accept that.
What choice do I have? It's 5,000 or nothing. At least this way the crew keeps their jobs. Under Warren. Under Warren, Rowan agreed flatly.
Working for a man who'll remind me every single day that he won, that he broke me, that everything I fought for was for nothing. He sat down heavily at the table, the envelope between them like a curse. I keep thinking about my father, he said quietly. How he drank himself to death because he couldn't handle failure. Couldn't live with the fact that he'd lost everything. I swore I'd never be like him, that I'd build something that lasted. And here I am, about to lose it all anyway. You're not your father. No? Feel like him right now. Feel like pouring a bottle and not stopping until the world goes away. But you won't. No, I won't. He looked at her. But I don't know what else to do, Mara. I'm out of options. She wanted to fix this. Wanted to find some clever solution that would make everything right. But she was a cook, not a miracle worker. All she had was a kitchen and skills that meant nothing against $12,000 and a banker's grudge. They sat in silence as the light faded, both of them out of words. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed listening to the wind and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Every door that had closed. Every person who'd decided she wasn't worth their time. Every place she'd tried to make home before being driven out. It always ended the same way. Her on the road again, alone again. Except this time, she wasn't alone. This time there were 9 men whose livelihoods depended on this ranch. And Rowan, who'd given her a chance when no one else would. She owed them better than running. But what could she do? The answer came to her around 3 a.m, born from desperation and the kind of reckless courage that came from having nothing left to lose. She found Rowan at dawn, already up and staring at Warren's offer letter like it might spontaneously combust. I have an idea, she said. You're not going to like it. At this point, I'll listen to anything. We fight him publicly. Make this about more than just the ranch. Make it about what he's doing and why. Rowan frowned. Explain. Warren's whole play depends on people not caring what happens to us. On this being a quiet business transaction that nobody questions. But what if we make noise? What if we tell everyone exactly what he's doing, calling a loan early out of spite, trying to force you into selling at a loss, destroying a ranch because his pride got hurt? People know Warren's ruthless. They don't care. They don't care about us, Mara corrected, but they might care about themselves. Warren owns half the businesses in Coldwater. He holds loans on a dozen other ranches and properties. If people see what he's willing to do to you over a cooking competition, they might start wondering what he'd do to them if they cross him. Rowan leaned back, considering. You want to turn this into a public fight? I want to make it expensive for him to destroy you. Right now it costs him nothing. No one's watching. No one's objecting. But if we make enough noise, if we force people to take sides, maybe it costs him something. Reputation, trust, future business. Or it makes him double down and crush us faster. Maybe. But we're getting crushed anyway. At least this way we're not quiet about it. Rowan studied her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite hope, but something close to it. The look of a man who'd been cornered finding a wall to put his back against. What exactly are you proposing? A town meeting. We call one, we stand up in front of everyone, and we lay out exactly what Warren's doing. Make him defend it. Make him explain why calling an early loan on a functioning ranch is sound banking instead of personal revenge. The town council won't authorize that kind of meeting. So we do it without authorization. Rent a hall, spread the word, make it happen. That'll cost money we don't have. Mara pulled out the $50 she'd won at the fair. She'd been saving it, but saving for what? There was no future if they lost the ranch. Use this. Rowan looked at the money, then at her. That's your prize. And I'm spending it on something that matters. Take it. He took it. 2 days later, they'd rented the Grange Hall, and word had spread through the county like wildfire. The Walking H was calling a public meeting to discuss matters of community concern. Everyone knew what that meant. Warren knew too. He sent a message through his lawyer saying the meeting was inappropriate, that business disputes should be handled privately, that he'd consider any public defamation grounds for legal action. Rowan sent back a one-word response. Come. The night of the meeting, the Grange Hall was packed. Ranchers and shopkeepers, ranch hands and housewives, curious townspeople, and Warren's allies. Someone had tipped off the newspaper from Helena,
and a reporter sat in the front row with a notebook.
Mara stood at the back with Briggs and the crew, her stomach tight with nerves. This had been her idea. If it went wrong, the consequences were on her. Rowan stood at the front, shoulders back, jaw set. He waited until the room quieted. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice carrying easily. "I'll keep this simple. 3 months ago, I hired a new cook for the Walking H. Her name's Mara Vance. She's the best cook I've ever employed, and she's done nothing but good work since the day she arrived." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mara felt eyes turning toward her. "The problem," Rowan continued, "is that some people in Coldwater decided they didn't like her, decided she wasn't the right kind of person to work at a respectable ranch. And when she won the cooking competition at the county fair, proving her skill in front of everyone, it embarrassed them." More murmurs, louder now. One person in particular took that embarrassment hard. Aldrich Warren. Warren sat in the third row, flanked by 2 men in suits. His face was stone. "Mr. Warren owns the bank that holds my operating loan," Rowan said. "A loan that's been in good standing for 5 years, never a late payment. But 3 days after that competition, he called it in. 60 days to repay $12,000 in full or face foreclosure. When I couldn't meet those terms, he offered to buy the ranch outright, for a quarter of its value." The murmurs became actual conversation, people turning to each other, voices rising. Mayor Hutchins stood up. "Now see here, Rowan, this is hardly the place." "This is exactly the place," Rowan cut him off. "Because what's happening to me can happen to anyone Warren decides he doesn't like. Any of you with loans at his bank, any of you who might someday offend him or challenge him or just be inconvenient, you think you're safe because you follow the rules? I followed the rules. Didn't matter. He's using the bank as a weapon." "That's a serious accusation," Hutchins said, his face red. "It's the truth. And I've got the documentation to prove it." Rowan held up the loan paperwork. "Loan called early with no cause. Offered to purchase at predatory rates. All because he didn't like my hiring decisions." Warren stood slowly. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, the voice of reason. "Mr. Hale is understandably upset about his financial situation, but he's mischaracterizing standard business practices as personal vendetta. The bank has every right to manage risk." "What risk?" Rowan interrupted. "My operation's profitable. My payments are current. The only thing that changed was hiring someone you don't approve of. The bank doesn't make decisions based on personal approval. We assess creditworthiness based on multiple factors. Name one factor that justifies calling this loan." Warren's jaw tightened. "I don't have to justify business decisions to you or anyone else in this room." "See, that's where you're wrong," Rowan said. "Because these people have a right to know how their banker operates, whether their deposits and loans are safe, or whether they're subject to the whims of a man who'll destroy anyone who bruises his ego." The room erupted. People shouting questions at Warren, at Rowan, at each other. Hutchins was trying to restore order and failing. The reporter was writing frantically. Warren's face had gone cold and hard as winter stone. "You'll regret this," he said, loud enough to cut through the noise. "I already regret plenty," Rowan shot back. "But speaking the truth isn't one of them." Warren walked out, his lawyers trailing behind him. Half the room watched him go. The other half stayed, questions flying. Rowan answered them all, showed the paperwork, explained the timeline, let them see exactly what had happened and why. By the time the meeting broke up 2 hours later, the whole county knew the story. The next morning, 3 ranchers withdrew their money from Warren's bank. By afternoon, it was 7. By the end of the week, Warren had lost 15 accounts, and the Helena newspaper had run a story with the headline, "Local Banker's Personal Vendetta Raises Questions About Lending Practices." It wasn't enough to save the ranch, but it was enough to hurt. Rowan found Mara in the kitchen the day the article came out. "Warren's not going to forgive this." "I know. He's going to come at us harder. Make an example, Suck. Let him try." Rowan smiled, tired but real. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the craziest." "Can it be both?" He laughed at that, and for a moment the weight lifted. But Warren moved faster than they expected. 2 days after the article, the county health inspector showed up unannounced. Spent 3 hours going through the kitchen with a clipboard and a grimace, writing up violations for things that had never been issues before. Insufficient ventilation, improper food storage, inadequate sanitation facilities. You've got 2 weeks to bring everything up to code, the inspector said, handing Mara a list that would cost hundreds they didn't have. This is harassment, Rowan said. This is public safety. If you've got complaints, take them up with the county board. The county board that Warren sat on. Of course. That same week, 2 horses went lame from bad feed delivered by Warren's newly acquired feed company. The fence wire they'd ordered arrived rusted and unusable. A windmill broke and the only repair company in the county was suddenly too busy to take their call. Warren was systematically cutting them off from every resource they needed to function. We can't keep this up, Briggs said one night after another disaster. He's bleeding us dry. So we adapt, Rowan said, but he sounded exhausted. Adapt with what? We're running on fumes and spite. That's not a business plan. You want to quit? Quit. No one's forcing you to stay. Briggs's face went hard. You know that's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? I'm saying we need help. Real help. Not just us fighting the whole town alone. There is no help. Warren's made sure of that. Mara listened to them argue and felt the fractures spreading. The crew was loyal, but loyalty had limits. Fear and exhaustion could break what solidarity couldn't. She went to bed that night knowing they were running out of time and options. And then, 3 days before the loan was due, Sykes collapsed. He'd been complaining about stomach pain for a day, brushing it off as bad food or overwork. But when Mara found him on the bunkhouse floor, skin gray and sweating, she knew it was worse. Get Rowan, she told Miller. Now! Sykes was conscious, but barely, his breathing shallow. Mara felt his abdomen, rigid, hot. Her stomach dropped. Something's ruptured, she said when Rowan arrived. He needs a doctor. Now! Closest doctor's in Coldwater. Then get him there. It's 30 miles round trip in the dark. He'll die if we don't try. Rowan looked at Sykes, at his gray face and pain-clenched jaw, and made the call. Briggs, hitch the wagon. Miller, Temple, help me get him loaded. Mara, I'm coming with you. You don't have to. I'm coming. They made the trip in brutal silence, Mara holding Sykes' head steady, while Rowan pushed the horses harder than he should have. Every jolt made Sykes moan. Every mile felt like 10. The doctor lived above his practice on Main Street. Rowan pounded on the door until lights came on and a gray-haired man in a nightshirt appeared, irritated until he saw Sykes. Get him inside, quickly. They carried him up the stairs to an examination room that smelled like carbolic and blood. The doctor cut away Sykes' shirt, pressed carefully on his abdomen, asked questions Sykes could barely answer. Appendix, he said finally. Ruptured, probably hours ago. He needs surgery immediately. Can you do it? Rowan asked. I can try, but I'll need help and it's going to cost. How much? $100, plus another $50 if he needs to stay more than a week. Rowan's face went pale. That was money they absolutely didn't have. Do it, Mara said. Whatever it costs, do it. Mara, Rowan started. Do it. The doctor looked between them, then nodded. Wait downstairs. This is going to take hours. They waited in the dark office, listening to footsteps overhead, and trying not to imagine the worst. Somewhere around 3 a.m, Rowan spoke. We can't afford this. I know. Even if he lives, we're done. Warren calls the loan in 2 days. We've got maybe $300 total. This wipes us out. So we're wiped out. At least Sykes is alive. Rowan laughed, harsh and tired. You really don't quit, do you? Never learned how. Yeah, me neither. Dawn was breaking when the doctor came down, blood on his sleeves, exhaustion in every line of his face. He's alive. Infection's bad, but if it doesn't turn septic, he should recover. Touch and go for a few days, though. Relief hit Mara so hard her knees went weak. Thank you, Rowan said. Don't thank me yet. Like I said, touch and go. The doctor washed his hands in the basin, not looking at them. I heard about what's happening with you and Warren. The loan. News travels. It does. And for what it's worth, I think he's wrong. What he's doing is wrong. The doctor dried his hands. The surgery's $100, but you can pay me when you're able. No interest. No deadline. Rowan stared. Why? Because I don't like bullies, and I don't like bankers who weaponize their position. You saved that boy's life tonight by getting him here fast. That counts for something in my book. He hung up the towel. Now get some rest. Both of you look like hell. They stayed with Sykes through the next day, taking turns sitting by his bed while he drifted in and out of fevered sleep. The doctor came and went, changing dressings, monitoring vitals, saying little. By evening, Sykes was conscious and lucid enough to complain about the pain. Mara had never been so happy to hear someone complain in her life. "You scared us," she said. "Sorry." His voice was weak but steady. "Feel like I got kicked by a horse." "Worse. You got cut open by a doctor, but you're alive. Thanks to you, both of you." He looked at Rowan. "Did we make it back in time?" "You made it. That's what matters. The loan. Don't worry about the loan." But there was no way not to worry about it. Tomorrow, Warren's deadline expired. Tomorrow, they lost everything. Unless. Mara excused herself and went downstairs, her mind racing. There was one card they hadn't played yet, one thing Warren hadn't accounted for. She found the doctor in his study, writing notes. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "The town meeting we held, the article in the paper, did it change anything? The way people see Warren?" The doctor set down his pen. "It made people nervous, made them question whether their money's safe with him. Some folks moved their accounts, others are watching to see what happens next." "What if what happens next is public?" "What do you mean?" "Warren's calling our loan tomorrow. We can't pay. He knows we can't pay. So he'll foreclose, buy the ranch for nothing, and everyone will see that speaking against him has consequences." She leaned forward. "But what if we don't let it be quiet? What if we make the foreclosure public too? Make him do it in front of witnesses?" The doctor's eyebrows rose. "You want to make him foreclose publicly?" "I want people to see exactly what he does when he wins. Maybe it won't change anything, but maybe it'll change enough." "That's a gamble. We've got nothing left but gambles." The doctor thought about it, then reached for a piece of paper. "If you're serious about this, I know some people who might be interested in witnessing. People who've had their own problems with Warren. People who might benefit from seeing his methods exposed." He started writing names. By the time Mara and Rowan left to return to the ranch, Sykes' stable and the doctor's list folded in her pocket, the sun was setting on their last day before foreclosure. Tomorrow, win or lose, the whole county would be watching. They rode back to the ranch in silence, the wagon wheels grinding over frozen ground, both of them too tired and too wired to speak. Mara kept thinking about the doctor's list, about the names he'd written down, people who'd been hurt by Warren in one way or another, people who might actually show up if given the chance to watch him cornered. It wasn't much, but it was something. When they reached the ranch, the crew was waiting on the porch, every single one of them, even though it was past midnight. "Sykes?" Briggs asked before they'd even climbed down. "Alive," Rowan said. "Doctor says he'll recover." The relief was visible, shoulders dropping, faces easing. Temple actually smiled, which Mara had seen maybe twice in 3 months. "What about tomorrow?" Miller asked, and just like that, the tension was back. "Tomorrow we see what happens," Rowan said. "Get some sleep. All of you." They dispersed slowly, reluctant, like children being sent to bed during a storm. Mara understood the feeling. Sleep meant morning came faster, and morning brought Warren. She found Rowan in the barn an hour later, checking on the horses even though they were fine, just needing something to do with his hands. "I spoke to the doctor," she said. "He gave me names. People who might come witness the foreclosure if we invite them." "Why would they come?" "Because some of them have been where we are. Warren squeezed a lot of people over the years. Most of them gave in quietly. But they remember." She pulled out the list. "There's a rancher from Millerville who lost his land 5 years ago. A widow whose husband's business loan got called right after he died. A shopkeeper who had to sell out because Warren raised his rent 3 times in 1 year. They all know what he does. They just never saw anyone fight back." Rowan took the list, read it in the dim lamplight. "You think they'll actually show?" "I think they might. If only to see someone stand up to him, even in losing." "That's what we're doing? Losing publicly?" "We're losing anyway. Might as well make it count." He folded the list carefully and tucked it in his pocket. "You know this might make things worse. Warren doesn't strike me as the forgiving type. I'm not looking for forgiveness. I'm looking for witnesses. To what? To the fact that we didn't go quiet, that we made him work for it. That counts for something, doesn't it? Rowan looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Yeah, it counts. He reached out and squeezed her shoulder, brief and awkward, the gesture of a man unused to showing affection. Then he was gone, heading for the main house, leaving Mara alone with the horses and the knowledge that tomorrow would break them. She went back to the kitchen and did what she always did when the world felt too big and too hostile. She cooked. Made bread even though they had bread. Made stew even though no one was hungry. Made pie from dried apples and the last of the sugar, working until her hands hurt and her back screamed and the kitchen smelled like everything good she'd ever known. Dawn came too fast. By 7, riders were arriving. Not many at first, just 3 or 4, ranchers and townspeople Mara didn't recognize. But by 8, there were a dozen. By 9, nearly 20 people had gathered in the ranch yard, stamping their feet against the cold, talking in low voices. The rancher from Millerville was there, a weathered man named Hutchins, who looked like he hadn't slept well in years. The widow stood near the barn, wrapped in a black coat, her face set hard. Others Mara didn't know but could guess. People who'd felt Warren's boot on their neck and come to see someone else wear the bruise. At 9:30, Warren arrived. He came in a black carriage with his lawyers, dressed like he was going to church instead of a foreclosure. His face showed nothing when he saw the crowd, but Mara caught the slight hesitation in his step. He hadn't expected witnesses. Good. Rowan met him in the center of the yard, the crew arrayed behind him like soldiers preparing for a battle they knew they'd lose. "Mr. Hale," Warren said, his voice carrying in the cold air, "I assume you're prepared to settle your debt?" "You know I'm not. Then I'm here to inform you that as of noon today, the Walking H Ranch will be foreclosed upon, and all assets will revert to the bank. You have until that time to gather your personal effects. The property and all structures must be vacated by sundown." "That's it?" Rowan asked. "No discussion? No extension?" The terms were clear, 60 days to repay in full. You failed to meet those terms. Because you designed them to fail. You called a performing loan out of spite, and we both know it. Warren's expression didn't change. Your interpretation of banking practices is irrelevant. The foreclosure stands. Then do it in front of these people, Rowan said, gesturing to the crowd. Let them see exactly how you operate. Let them watch you take a functioning ranch because your pride got hurt. For the first time, Warren's composure cracked. Just slightly, just enough for Mara to see the anger beneath. I don't need to justify business decisions to a mob. These aren't a mob. They're your customers, your depositors, people who trust you with their money and their futures. Don't they have a right to see how you treat that trust? Warren's jaw tightened. This is inappropriate. This is transparent, something you're not used to. One of Warren's lawyers stepped forward, a thin man with spectacles and a briefcase. Mr. Hale, these theatrics won't change the outcome. The foreclosure is legal and binding. If you continue to interfere with what? Mara stepped forward, her voice cutting across the yard. With him stealing a ranch? With him using the bank as a weapon? You call that legal? I call it corruption. The lawyer's face flushed. Young woman, you are in no position to make accusations. I'm in the perfect position. I'm the reason he's doing this, because I won a cooking competition and it embarrassed him. That's what this is about. Not banking, not risk management, revenge. Warren turned his cold eyes on her. You flatter yourself, Miss Vance, that this foreclosure has nothing to do with you. Then why did you call the loan 3 days after the fair? Coincidence. Convenient coincidence. Believe what you like. It changes nothing. Warren pulled out a pocket watch, checked it with deliberate precision. You have 2 hours and 17 minutes. I suggest you use them wisely. He turned to leave. Wait! A voice called from the crowd. It was Hutchins, the rancher from Millerville. He stepped forward, shoulders back despite his age. I got a question, Mr. Warren, seeing as we're all here anyway. Warren stopped. I'm not here to answer questions. Just one. Won't take but a minute. Hutchins' voice was steady, conversational. 5 years ago, you foreclosed on my ranch. Called my loan early, same as you're doing here. Said it was risk management, same as you're saying now. I always wondered about that, seeing as my payments were current and my operation was sound. Now I'm wondering if maybe I embarrassed you somehow. Can't recall doing it, but memory's not what it was. Warren's face was stone. Your situation was entirely different. Was it? Because from where I'm standing, looks about the same. Good operation, current payments, sudden foreclosure. Only difference is I went quiet and Mr. Hale here decided to make noise. Hutchins looked around at the crowd. Makes a man think maybe making noise is the smarter play. Murmurs rippled through the witnesses. Heads nodding, eyes turning to Warren with new suspicion. The widow spoke next, her voice sharp and clear. My husband's business loan got called 2 weeks after his funeral. You told me it was policy, that the bank needed to reassess after a principal's death. But the business was profitable. I could have kept it running. Instead, you foreclosed and sold the property to your cousin for half its value. That policy too? Warren's lawyer started to speak, but Warren cut him off with a gesture. I'm not here to relitigate past business, Warren said, his voice tight. If you have complaints about how your situations were handled, you're welcome to file formal grievances through the proper channels. Already did that, the widow said. 5 years ago. Never heard back. Funny how that works. More murmurs. Louder now. Angry. A shopkeeper Mara recognized from town stepped forward. What about rent increases? You raised mine 40% in 1 year. When I complained, you said market rates. But nobody else's rent went up. Just mine. Just after I testified against your nephew in that property dispute. Market conditions vary. Yeah, they vary based on whether you like someone or not, the shopkeeper interrupted. Same as these foreclosures. Same as everything you do. You use the bank like a hammer, and anyone who crosses you gets their head smashed. We all know it. We just been too scared to say it out loud. The crowd was pressing closer now, not threatening but present, their collective weight making itself felt. Warren's lawyers looked nervous. Even Warren himself seemed slightly off balance. Rowan seized the moment. You want to foreclose, Mr. Warren? Fine, do it, but do it here, in front of everyone. Show them exactly who you are. Show them what happens when someone doesn't bow to Aldrich Warren. This is absurd. This is honest. Maybe for the first time in years, someone's being honest about how you operate. And you hate it. You hate that people are watching. You hate that you can't make this disappear with paperwork and lawyers. Warren's composure finally cracked completely. You self-righteous fool. You think this grandstanding will save you? You think these people care what happens to you? They don't. They're here for the spectacle. And when it's over, they'll go home and nothing will change. I'll still own this ranch. You'll still have nothing. And all this noise will be forgotten by next week. Maybe, Rowan said, but they'll remember you, how you looked standing here, what you said, how you acted when someone finally called you out in public. That's not nothing. For a moment, Warren just stared at him. Then he turned to his lawyers. File the foreclosure paperwork immediately. I want this property seized and these people removed by sundown. Yes, sir, the thin lawyer said, already opening his briefcase. And I want formal trespass notices filed against anyone who remains after 6 o'clock. Criminal charges if they refuse to leave. Mr. Warren, the other lawyer said quietly, perhaps we should do it, all of it. I'm done being patient with these people. He walked back to his carriage, spine rigid with fury. The thin lawyer approached Rowan with papers. This is notice of foreclosure. All assets are now property of First Bank of Cold Water. You and your employees have until 6 o'clock to vacate. After that, you'll be subject to arrest for trespassing. He held out the papers. Rowan took them without looking down. You satisfied? The lawyer asked quietly. Was the show worth it? Ask me in a week. The lawyer snorted and walked away. The crowd lingered, uncertain. A few people approached Rowan, shook his hand, offered quiet words of support that wouldn't stop the foreclosure, but maybe meant something anyway. Hutchins clasped Rowan's shoulder. You did good, son. Took more guts than I had. Fat lot of good it did. You don't know that yet. Sometimes seeds take time to grow. The widow stopped in front of Mara. I'm sorry this happened. For what it's worth, I think you're brave, both of you. Brave or stupid, Mara said. Sometimes there's not much difference. The woman smiled, sad and knowing. But stupid people don't scare men like Warren. You scared him, I could see it. That counts. One by one, the witnesses departed. back to their own ranches and shops and lives, carrying the story with them. What they'd do with it, Mara couldn't guess, but at least it was out there now. At least people had seen. By 11, the yard was empty except for the crew. Briggs spoke first. "So that's it? We're done?" "We're done," Rowan confirmed. "What do we do?" "Pack. You've all got wages coming. I'll pay what I can before Warren seizes the accounts. And then? Then you find new work. I'll write references for anyone who needs them." Miller kicked at the frozen ground. "This is horseshit." "Yeah," Rowan agreed. "It is." They dispersed to gather their things, moving like men in a funeral procession. Mara watched them go and felt the weight of it settle over her. They'd fought, they'd made noise, they'd dragged Warren into the light and forced him to show his hand, and they'd lost anyway. She went to the kitchen one last time. It looked the same as always, clean counters, hanging pots, the sourdough starter she'd been feeding for months sitting in its crock. Someone else's kitchen now, someone else's bread. She packed her meager belongings in 10 minutes. Everything she owned fit in the same canvas bag she'd arrived with. Funny how that worked. Come with nothing, leave with nothing, the circle complete. Rowan found her sitting on the porch steps at 4 o'clock, bag at her feet. "You could have left earlier," he said. "Didn't have to wait." "Where would I go?" He sat down beside her. "Back to town, I guess. Find work somewhere." "Town doesn't want me, you know that." "Maybe somewhere else then. You're good at what you do. Someplace will see that." Mara looked out at the ranch, the barn, the corrals, the mountains rising beyond. "I thought this was the place. Thought maybe I'd finally found somewhere I could stay." "I'm sorry. Not your fault." "Feels like it. I brought this down on all of us. If I just kept my head down, accepted how things were, we'd still be here," Mara interrupted. "But we'd be smaller. We'd be people who let Warren win without even trying. Is that better? I don't know. Ask me when I'm not sitting here waiting to be thrown off my own land." They sat in silence as the sun dropped toward the horizon. Around them, the crew loaded wagons with their belongings. Temple was crying, trying to hide it. Miller kept punching the side of the barn like it had personally betrayed him. At 5:30, horses approached. Mara's stomach dropped. Too early for Warren's people, unless they were coming to throw them out ahead of schedule. But when the riders came into view, it wasn't lawyers or sheriffs. It was the Helena newspaper reporter accompanied by 2 men in city clothes. The reporter dismounted, notebook already in hand. "Mr. Hale, I'm Thomas Reed. We met at the town meeting. These gentlemen are from the Territorial Banking Commission. They'd like to ask you some questions." One of the commission men stepped forward, middle-aged and serious. "Mr. Hale, we've been hearing troubling reports about lending practices at First Bank of Coldwater. Your public statement, combined with other complaints, has raised concerns. We'd like to review your loan documentation and speak with you about the foreclosure process." Rowan stood slowly. "You want to review it now? The foreclosure's already done." "Actually, that's not quite accurate. A foreclosure isn't complete until the property formally changes hands and all legal requirements are met. Until then, we have authority to freeze proceedings if we suspect irregularities." The man's expression was carefully neutral. "So if you'd be willing to cooperate with our investigation, we can delay the foreclosure until our review is complete." Mara felt something jump in her chest. Not hope. Hope was dangerous. But something close. "How long would that take?" Rowan asked. "Depends on what we find. Could be days. Could be weeks. And if you find irregularities? Then we'd have grounds to invalidate the foreclosure and potentially revoke the bank's charter. But I want to be clear, this is an investigation, not a guarantee. We might find nothing wrong. The foreclosure might proceed exactly as planned." "But it might not," Mara said. The commission man looked at her. "No, it might not." Rowan glanced at Mara, something like wonder in his face. Then back to the commission men. "What do you need from me?" They spread papers across the kitchen table. Loan documents, payment histories, correspondence between Rowan and the bank. The commission men asked questions, made notes, requested clarifications. The reporter watched it all, occasionally scratching in his notebook. By 6 o'clock, no one from the bank had arrived. Warren's deadline passed without enforcement. By 7, word had spread through Coldwater that the Banking Commission was at the Walking H, and people were gathering in town to speculate. By 8, The commission men had enough to issue a temporary injunction.
We're freezing all foreclosure proceedings pending review, the lead investigator announced. Mr. Warren will be notified tonight. You're to continue operating as normal until further notice. Rowan actually laughed. Normal, right. I understand this is complicated, but legally, the ranch remains yours until we complete our investigation. That could work in your favor or against it, depending on what we find. Either way, thank you, Rowan said, for looking. Don't thank us yet. Just doing our job. They left with copies of everything, the reporter trailing after them like a hunting dog on scent. The crew emerged from the bunkhouse where they'd been waiting, faces cautious. We staying? Briggs asked. For now, Rowan said, at least until the commission decides one way or another. And if they decide against us? Then we're back where we started, but tonight we've got a reprieve. I'll take it. Miller whooped loud enough to startle the horses. Temple stopped crying and actually grinned. Even Briggs cracked a smile. Mara stood in the kitchen doorway watching them celebrate, feeling something dangerous and wonderful unfurling in her chest. They weren't saved, weren't even close. But they had time. They had a chance. Sometimes that was enough. Rowan found her there, leaning against the doorframe, too wrung out to move. You did this, he said. I didn't do anything. The commission came because we made noise. Because we forced Warren into the open and people saw what he really is. The doctor, those witnesses, the reporter. All of that happened because you said we should fight publicly. So yeah, you did this. Mara shook her head. We did it. All of us. Maybe, but it was your idea. He was quiet for a moment. I thought for sure we were done. Thought I'd be sleeping in the bunkhouse at someone else's ranch by tonight. Instead, I'm here. We're here, and it's because you wouldn't let us go quietly. Don't celebrate yet. We could still lose everything. I know, but today we didn't. Today we're still standing.
That's worth something. He was right. It was worth something. That night, Mara cooked for the crew like it was a holiday. Used the last of the good supplies, made everything she knew how to make, and served it to 9 men who ate like they'd been starving. The conversation was loud and hopeful, and tinged with the kind of desperate joy that came from escaping disaster by inches. But in the back of Mara's mind, she couldn't stop thinking about Warren, about how his face had looked when the crowd turned on him, about the cold fury in his voice when he ordered the foreclosure accelerated. Men like Warren didn't forgive humiliation. They retaliated. The question wasn't if he'd come at them again. It was when and how hard. She was cleaning up after dinner when Rowan came in, a telegram in his hand. From the commission, he said. They want a full audit of all Warren's loans from the past 10 years. Every foreclosure, every early call, every interest rate adjustment. They're opening a formal investigation into the bank's practices. That's good, right? That's war. Warren's going to fight this with everything he has. Lawyers, politicians, every favor he's ever banked. This isn't going to be quick or clean. We knew it wouldn't be. Yeah, but knowing and living it are different things. He set down the telegram. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. If this gets worse, if Warren comes after us harder, if the town turns uglier, if people start getting hurt, will you stay? Mara met his eyes, saw the question beneath the question, the fear that she'd cut and run the way she always had before. I'll stay, she said, as long as you'll have me. Then we see this through, together. Together, she agreed. Outside, the crew was still celebrating. Inside, Mara and Rowan stood in the kitchen that might or might not be theirs tomorrow, bound together by choices made and consequences accepted. The war with Warren had just begun. But for tonight, they'd survived another day, and sometimes survival was victory enough. Warren's retaliation came faster than expected. 3 days after the Banking Commission opened their investigation, the town council called an emergency meeting. The stated purpose was to discuss public health concerns at local ranching operations. Everyone knew what that really meant. Rowan got the notice at dawn, delivered by the same uncomfortable kid who'd brought Warren's foreclosure letter. This time, the boy at least managed to mumble an apology before riding off. They're coming after the kitchen, Mara said, reading over Rowan's shoulder. Health code violations? That inspector's report from last month. That report was garbage, and everyone knows it. Doesn't matter if it's garbage, it's official, and Warren's got enough people on the council to make it stick. She felt her jaw tighten. He's going to shut us down through the back door. Can't foreclose, so he'll condemn the operation instead. Rowan crumpled the notice in his fist. Then we fight it, same as before. How? The council meets tonight. We don't have time to We make time. We get witnesses, we get documentation, we show up, and we make them justify every single violation they're claiming. His eyes were hard. Warren wants a war, fine, but he's going to earn every inch. By noon, they'd mobilized. Briggs rode to neighboring ranches, spreading word about the council meeting and what it really meant. Miller and Temple documented every inch of the kitchen, photographing the stove, the storage, the ventilation that the inspector had called inadequate. Mara went through her supplies and records, pulling together evidence of proper food handling and safety practices. The crew worked with focused intensity, driven by anger and something deeper. They'd come too close to losing everything. They weren't going quietly now. At 4 o'clock, the doctor arrived unannounced, his medical bag in hand and determination in his weathered face. "Heard about the council meeting," he said. "Thought you might need a professional opinion on those health violations." "You don't have to do this," Rowan said. "Warren's going to remember everyone who stands with us. Let him remember. I'm tired of watching good people get crushed by that man's ego." The doctor set down his bag. "Now show me this kitchen that's supposedly a public health hazard." He spent an hour examining everything. Checked temperatures, inspected storage practices, reviewed Mara's cleaning protocols. When he finished, he was smiling. "This kitchen is cleaner than half the restaurants in Coldwater, better organized too. Whoever wrote that violation report either didn't know what they were looking at or was told what to find. My money's on the latter." "Will you testify to that?" Mara asked. "I'll do better than testify. I'll stake my medical license on it. Let's see Warren argue with that." By 6 o'clock, people were arriving at the Grange Hall for the council meeting. More than Mara expected. Ranchers and townspeople, some supportive, some just curious, all of them sensing blood in the water. The council sat at a long table at the front, Mayor Hutchins in the center, flanked by 4 others. Warren wasn't officially part of the council, but he sat in the front row like a king observing his court. His lawyers were with him, and the health inspector who'd written the damning report. Hutchins called the meeting to order with a gavel that sounded like a gunshot. "We're here to discuss serious health code violations at the Walking H Ranch. The county inspector has filed a comprehensive report detailing multiple infractions that pose significant risk to public safety. Before we proceed to remediation or closure orders, we'll hear from the inspector." The inspector stood, a nervous-looking man named Dawson, who kept glancing at Warren like a dog checking with its master. "My inspection revealed numerous violations," he began, reading from his report. "Inadequate ventilation in the cooking area, improper food storage temperatures, insufficient sanitation facilities, presence of pests. Each of these individually would be cause for concern. Together, they constitute a pattern of negligence that warrants immediate action." He sat down quickly, avoiding eye contact with anyone. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson," Hutchins said. "Now, Mr. Hale, you've requested the opportunity to respond. You have 10 minutes.
Rowan stood and Mara felt a surge of pride at how steady he looked. No fear, no hesitation. "Everything in that report is either exaggerated or fabricated," Rowan said clearly, "and I can prove it. First, ventilation. Our kitchen has 2 windows and a vent system installed 3 years ago. Here's the documentation from the contractor who installed it, confirming it meets territorial standards." He handed papers to the council. Hutchins reviewed them with visible reluctance. "Second, food storage. We maintain a cold box that keeps temperatures below 40 degrees. Here are daily temperature logs going back 6 months. Never once have we exceeded safe limits." More papers. The council members exchanged glances. "Third, sanitation. We have running water from a well tested annually for safety. Here's this year's water quality report. Clean. We have a privy located regulation distance from food preparation areas, and we follow standard cleaning protocols." Doctor. "Mitchell can speak to that." The doctor stood. "I inspected the Walking H kitchen this afternoon. It's spotless. Better maintained than many commercial operations I've seen. If that kitchen poses a health risk, then half the establishments in Coldwater should be shut down." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hutchins banged his gavel. "Doctor, you're not an official inspector." "No, but I am a licensed physician with 30 years of experience in public health.
I know a clean kitchen when I see one. And I know a fraudulent report when I read one. Dawson's face went red. Now see here. Show me the pests, the doctor interrupted. You claim there's evidence of infestation. Where? Show me the droppings, the nesting material, the damage, because I didn't see any. You documented assumptions, not evidence. The doctor turned to the counsel. This report is designed to reach a predetermined conclusion. Every violation is vague enough to be unfalsifiable. Inadequate ventilation, compared to what standard? Improper storage. Based on what measurement? It's all subjective. And when you combine subjective violations with political motivation, you get what we have here. A hit job. The room erupted. People shouting questions, demanding answers. Hutchins hammered his gavel repeatedly. Order! We will have order! When the noise died down, Warren stood. He didn't ask permission to speak. This is theater, he said, his voice cutting through the room. Dr. Mitchell is a friend of Mr. Hale's. Of course he's going to defend him. But the fact remains that an official county inspector found serious violations. We can debate the severity, but the violations exist. And this council has a responsibility to protect public health, even when that's politically inconvenient. Politically inconvenient, Rowan repeated. That's rich coming from you. I'm not on trial here, Mr. Hale. Maybe you should be, because everyone in this room knows what this is really about. You're using health codes as a weapon because the foreclosure didn't work, because the banking commission is investigating your practices, because people are starting to question whether you're fit to hold the power you've got. Warren's expression turned to ice. Careful, Rowan. Why? What are you going to do? Foreclose on me again? Oh, wait, you can't. Not while you're under investigation. So instead, you're trying to shut down my operation through back channels. Make it look official. Make it look like you're just doing your civic duty. Rowan turned to address the room. But everyone here knows the truth. Warren wants my ranch. He's wanted it for years, and he's willing to destroy me to get it. That's not public service, that's corruption. Those are serious allegations, one of the council members said. Then let's test them. Put it to a vote. Right now. Close the Walking H based on these violations. See how many of you are willing to go on record supporting Warren's vendetta. Hutchins looked trapped. This isn't how You called this emergency meeting. You brought us here tonight to shut us down, so do it. Vote. Show everyone where you stand. The council members looked at each other, then at Warren, then at the crowd watching with hungry eyes. No one wanted to be the first to speak. Finally, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, who owned the general store, cleared her throat. I'd like to propose we table this matter pending a second independent inspection. If the violations are as serious as Mr. Dawson claims, another inspector will confirm them. If they're not, we've saved ourselves from making a terrible mistake. Seconded, another council member said quickly. Hutchins looked at Warren. Warren's face was stone, but Mara could see the fury in his eyes. All in favor of tabling? 4 hands went up. Only Hutchins abstained. Motion carries. This matter is tabled pending further review. Hutchins banged his gavel with clear reluctance. Meeting adjourned. The crowd dispersed slowly, people congratulating Rowan, shaking the doctor's hand. Warren left without a word, his lawyers trailing behind him like carrion birds. Outside, Rowan leaned against the wagon, exhaling shakily. We bought time, he said. That's all. Time's what we need, Mara replied. The banking commission is still investigating. Every day Warren doesn't crush us is another day for them to find what they're looking for. If there's anything to find, there is. Men like Warren don't get that powerful by following the rules. They just get good at hiding the breaking. The doctor joined them, looking satisfied. That was well done, both of you. You're the one who called Dawson's report what it was, Rowan said. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Warren's not going to forget this. Neither is the council. You've made enemies tonight. We had enemies before tonight. At least now they know we'll fight back. Over the next week, the Banking Commission worked methodically through Warren's records. They interviewed borrowers, reviewed loan files, compared interest rates and terms across different customers. The reporter from Helena published daily updates, each one more damaging than the last. Warren had called loans early on 17 different occasions over 10 years. In every case, the borrower had either opposed him politically or refused to sell property he wanted. The pattern was undeniable. He'd charge different interest rates to different customers with identical credit profiles. The higher rates always went to people who'd crossed him or spoken against him publicly. He'd foreclosed on 6 properties in the past decade. In 5 of those cases, he'd purchased the property himself within months, always at prices well below market value. The evidence piled up like snow in winter, each piece small but the accumulation crushing. Coldwater began to fracture. Some people defended Warren. He was rich, powerful, had built half the town. Others turned on him. They'd been victims themselves, or new victims, and now they had permission to be angry. The fracture became a fault line after Mrs. Patterson closed her account at Warren's bank and moved her money to Millerville. 3 other businesses followed within days. Then a dozen individuals. Then more. Warren's empire, built on fear and control, started to crack. The final blow came from an unexpected direction. 2 weeks into the investigation, a clerk from Warren's bank walked into the commission's temporary office and handed over a ledger. A private ledger kept in Warren's personal safe, documenting transactions that never appeared in the official books. Loans made to friends at preferential rates, payments to local officials for favorable treatment, a systematic pattern of using depositors' money for personal investments without their knowledge or consent. The clerk was a young woman named Sarah who'd worked for Warren for 3 years. She was scared, shaking, but determined. "He's not a banker," she told the investigators. "He's a thief, and I'm tired of being part of it." The commission arrested Warren that afternoon. The news spread through Coldwater like wildfire. People gathered in the streets, disbelieving, shocked, some quietly satisfied. The man who'd controlled their town for a decade was in a jail cell, facing charges that could destroy him. Rowan got the news from the reporter, who rode out to the ranch specifically to tell him. "They're charging him with fraud, embezzlement, and corruption of public officials. If even half of it sticks, he's done. The bank's charter will be revoked. His assets will be seized. Everything he built is gone." Rowan sat down heavily. "Just like that?" "Not just like that. This has been building for years. You were just the catalyst, the one who finally stood up and said no loudly enough that people had to listen." After the reporter left, Rowan found Mara in the kitchen. She was making bread, hands working the dough with steady rhythm. "Did you hear?" "Heard. Hard not to with Miller shouting like that." She didn't stop kneading. "It's good news. It's over. Warren's finished. The foreclosure's dead. The ranch is safe." "I know." "Then why don't you look happy?" Mara finally stopped and looked at him. "Because I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. I'm not used to things going right. Maybe it's time to get used to it. Maybe," she went back to the dough, "or maybe I just need to see it through first. Make sure it's real." It became real 3 days later when the Banking Commission issued their final report. Warren was formally charged with 14 counts of fraud and embezzlement. The bank's charter was revoked pending reorganization under new management. All foreclosures initiated in the past year were suspended and subject to review. That included the Walking H. The commission representative who delivered the news did so with a rare smile. "Your loan has been restructured under standard terms. You've got 10 years to repay at fair interest rates. The ranch is yours, Mr. Hale, legally and completely." Rowan couldn't speak, just stood there holding the papers like they might evaporate. The representative continued. "For what it's worth, your case is what broke this open. Without your willingness to fight publicly, Warren might have gotten away with it for years. You did the whole territory a service." After he left, the crew gathered in the yard. Nobody quite knew what to say. They'd been living with the threat of loss for so long that safety felt strange. Briggs finally broke the silence. "So we staying?" "We're staying," Rowan confirmed. "All of us, long as you want to." "And Mara?" Rowan looked at her. "That's up to Mara." Every eye turned to her. Mara felt the weight of their expectation, their hope. These men who'd become something like family. This place that had become something like home. "I'm staying," she said. "If you'll have me." The cheer that went up scared the horses. That night they had a real celebration, not the desperate, defiant joy of survival, but genuine happiness, the kind that came from winning against odds that should have crushed them. Someone brought out a fiddle again. Someone else produced whiskey that was actually good this time. They danced and sang and told stories, and for a few hours the weight of the past months lifted. Mara cooked a feast: roasted beef, fresh bread, vegetables from the root cellar, pie made with apples she'd been hoarding. She watched the crew eat and laugh and felt something shift inside her. Something that had been clenched tight for as long as she could remember finally relaxing. Rowan found her on the porch after midnight, when the party had finally wound down and the crew had stumbled off to bed. "Hell of a thing," he said, sitting beside her. "Which part?" "All of it. You showing up in the snow, Warren trying to crush us actually winning." He shook his head. 6 months ago, I would have said it was impossible. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in a stagecoach, wondering where I'd find my next meal. And now? Now I'm here, with a job I'm good at. People who don't judge me for what I look like. A place that feels like it might actually be home. She looked at him. "That's more than I've ever had. You earned it, every bit of it. We earned it. You could have sent me away that first night, could have given in when Warren squeezed, could have taken his offer and kept the ranch as his foreman. But you didn't. Neither did you. You could have run when things got hard, could have saved yourself a lot of trouble. Running's what I've always done. Figured it was time to try something different." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel overhead. In the distance, an owl called. The mountains stood dark against the sky, permanent and indifferent to human drama. "What happens now?" Mara asked finally. "Now we rebuild, fix what's broken, get the operation running properly again, pay down the loan over time." Rowan stretched, joints popping. Boring stuff mostly, but honest work. "This sounds good to me." "Yeah?" He glanced at her. "Because I was thinking, the ranch does well enough, we could expand the kitchen. Maybe bring in some help for you. Build it into something bigger than just feeding the crew." "Like what?" "Don't know yet, but you're too good a cook to waste on just us. Seems like there should be more to it, if you wanted." Mara felt something warm kindle in her chest. "I'd like that." "Good. Then we'll figure it out, together." "Together," she agreed. The weeks that followed settled into rhythm. The crew worked to repair fences and buildings neglected during the crisis. Mara reorganized the kitchen, ordered proper supplies now that they had credit again, experimented with dishes she'd never had the resources to attempt. Sykes recovered and returned to work, moving carefully but healing well. He'd been sobered by his brush with death, quieter than before, but there was a steadiness to him now that hadn't been there before. Carter came back too, sheepish and apologetic, asking if his old job was still available. Rowan took him back without hesitation. The crew was whole again. Coldwater itself changed. Warren's arrest had been an earthquake, and the aftershocks kept coming. 3 town council members resigned under pressure. The mayor barely survived a recall vote. New businesses opened, run by people who'd been waiting for Warren's grip to loosen. The town didn't transform overnight into some paradise of fairness. Old prejudices ran deep, but the absolute power Warren had wielded was gone, and in its absence, space opened for different voices. Mrs. Coyle at the Mercantile didn't become friendly, but she became civil. She sold Mara supplies without comment or complaint, which was as close to victory as Mara needed. Other changes were subtler: a nod from someone on the street, a murmured good morning at the feed store. The slow, grudging acknowledgement that maybe the big woman from the Walking H wasn't the problem they'd decided she was. Mara didn't need their approval, but she'd be lying if she said the shift didn't matter. 3 months after Warren's arrest, the trial began. It was held in Helena because no jury in Coldwater could be impartial. The proceedings were covered extensively by newspapers across the territory. Mara and Rowan attended the first day, sitting in the back of the courtroom while prosecutors laid out their case. The evidence was overwhelming: forged documents, testimony from victims, that damning ledger with Warren's own handwriting. Warren sat at the defense table, looking smaller than Mara remembered. Without his power, without his bank and his influence and his ability to make people afraid, he was just an aging man facing consequences he'd avoided for decades. He saw them in the gallery. His eyes met Mara's across the courtroom, and for a moment she saw naked hatred there. Rage at being brought low, rage at the people who dared to fight back. Then he looked away, and Mara felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet recognition that some stories end with the villain diminished, stripped of what made them dangerous. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Warren was sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. His assets were seized and liquidated to repay his victims. The bank was reorganized under new management with strict oversight. The man who'd controlled Coldwater for a decade would die in a cell, forgotten and powerless. Mara got the news from the Helena paper. She read it once, folded the paper carefully, and went back to making dinner. There was beef stew on the stove and bread in the oven, and work didn't stop for other people's endings. But that night, after the crew had eaten and dispersed, she allowed herself a moment, stood in the kitchen that was truly hers now, in the home she'd fought for and earned, and let herself feel it. Victory. Not loud or triumphant, just the quiet certainty that she'd stood her ground and the ground had held. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it was glorious. The mountains shed their snow, the creek ran high and fast, and the range turned green almost overnight. The walking H thrived. The crew worked hard and well, loyalty rewarded with fair wages and decent treatment. The cattle multiplied. The horses stayed healthy. Every debt payment went out on time. Mara's kitchen became legendary, not just among the crew, but across the territory. Word spread about the cook at the Walking H, who could turn simple ingredients into something remarkable. Ranchers passing through would time their visits to coincide with meals. A few even tried to hire her away, offering more money, better conditions. She turned them all down. She'd found her place. She wasn't leaving. One evening in late May, Rowan came to the kitchen with a proposal. "I've been thinking about what we discussed, expanding what you do here." "And?" "There's a Cattle Buyers Association meeting in Helena next month. 50 ranchers from across the territory. They're looking for someone to cater the event. I put your name forward. They want you to do it." Mara's heart jumped. "That's a big job." "You can handle it, and the money's good. $300 for 3 days of meals." $300, more than she made in a year at the ranch. That's a lot of money. You'd earn it, and it would establish you beyond just the Walking H, give you a reputation, options. Rowan paused. "I'm not trying to push you out, but you're too talented to just cook for 12 men forever. You should have more." Mara thought about it, about cooking for 50 ranchers, proving herself on a bigger stage, about the respect that would come with success and the opportunities that might follow. But she also thought about this kitchen, these men, this life she'd built. "What if I took the job but came back after?" she asked. "Use the money to improve the kitchen here? Maybe train someone to help me. Build something sustainable instead of just chasing the next opportunity." Rowan smiled. "That sounds perfect." The Helena job was everything she hoped and more. 50 ranchers who came expecting competent food and left raving about the best meals they'd had in years. Mara worked 18-hour days, managed a temporary crew, and delivered results that exceeded every expectation. She came home exhausted, triumphant, and $300 richer. She used half the money to renovate the kitchen. New stove, better storage, proper equipment. The other half she saved, a cushion against uncertainty. Though for the first time in her life, uncertainty felt distant. As summer settled in, a rhythm emerged that felt less like survival and more like actual living. Work and rest balanced. Challenges met and overcome without existential dread. A future that extended beyond the next meal, the next paycheck, the next escape. One evening, Mara and Rowan sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. It had become a habit, these quiet conversations at day's end. "You ever think about what comes next?" Rowan asked. "Next in what sense?" "In the sense that we've been so focused on surviving, I don't know if we've thought about actually building something, long term." "I think about it," Mara admitted, "about what this place could become, about staying here for years instead of months. And it still scares me sometimes, waiting for it to fall apart. But it's getting easier, trusting that maybe this is real, that maybe I've actually found somewhere I belong." Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then, "You do belong here, Mara. You know that, right? Not because you're useful or because you can cook, because you're part of this place now, part of what makes it work. You're part of it too. You and the crew, all of us together." "Yeah, all of us." He hesitated, then continued. I want to ask you something, and you can say no, but I've been thinking about it for a while. Go ahead. How would you feel about being a partner? Not just the cook, but an actual partner in the ranch. Equal stake, equal say in decisions. We build this thing together, properly. Mara's breath caught. That's a big step. I know, but you've earned it. You saved this place as much as I did. More, maybe. And I'd rather run it with someone I trust than try to do it alone. She looked at him, at his weathered face and serious eyes, and the offer that represented more than just business. It was acceptance. It was respect. It was a place in the world that was hers by right, not charity. Yes, she said, I'd like that. His smile was genuine and warm. Good. I'll have the papers drawn up. They shook on it there on the porch, two people who'd fought their way from almost nothing to something real and solid. The summer passed in honest work and steady progress. The partnership was formalized. Mara's name went on the deed alongside Rowan's. The Walking H Ranch became theirs together, built on shared struggle and mutual respect. The crew celebrated with another party because they'd gotten good at finding reasons to celebrate. Miller made a speech that was mostly incoherent but deeply felt. Briggs gave Mara a knife he'd been carrying for 40 years, saying she'd earned the right to have it. Temple cried again, but happy tears this time. Mara stood in the center of it all, surrounded by people who'd become family, and felt something she'd never felt before. Not just acceptance, not just tolerance, but actual belonging. The bone-deep knowledge that she was wanted, valued, necessary. She'd spent 32 years looking for this feeling. Now that she had it, she was never letting go. As autumn approached, bringing cooler air and the promise of winter, Mara found herself thinking about the woman who'd walked up this road in the snow almost a year ago. Desperate, rejected, down to her last hope. That woman was still there, somewhere inside her. The scars didn't disappear just because things got better. The memory of every door that had closed, every opportunity denied, every judgment rendered based on appearance alone. But that woman had also learned something crucial. That the world's judgment didn't have to be the final word, that fighting back mattered, that standing your ground could shift the ground itself. One morning in October, a stage pulled up to the ranch. A woman climbed down, heavy-set and tired, carrying everything she owned in a canvas bag. She looked around with the wary hope of someone who'd been disappointed too many times. Mara recognized that look. She'd worn it herself. "Help you?" she called from the porch. "I'm looking for work," the woman said. "Heard you might need kitchen help." Mara studied her, saw the desperation poorly hidden, saw the expectation of rejection, saw herself a year ago. "You cook?" "Some. Enough to be useful." "Where'd you work before?" "Hotels, mostly, until they decided they didn't want me anymore." The woman's jaw tightened. "I can work hard. I don't cause trouble. I just need a chance." Mara stepped off the porch and walked over. Up close, she could see the calluses on the woman's hands, the exhaustion in her face, the stubborn pride that kept her standing despite everything. "What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Chen." "Well, Sarah, I'm Mara. I run the kitchen here, and as it happens, I could use help, especially with winter coming on." Sarah's eyes widened. "You mean it?" "I don't say things I don't mean. Job's yours if you want it. We'll start you on a trial, same as everyone gets. You do good work, it becomes permanent. Fair wages, room and board, and nobody here cares what you look like as long as you pull your weight." "I'll work hard, I promise." "I know you will. Come on, I'll show you the kitchen." As they walked toward the building, Rowan appeared from the barn. He looked at Sarah, then at Mara, and understanding passed between them. "New hire?" he asked. "Kitchen help. She's on trial." "Good. We could use the extra hands." He tipped his hat to Sarah. "Welcome to the Walking H." Sarah looked between them, something like wonder on her face. "Thank you, both of you." "Don't thank us yet," Mara said. "Wait until you've been here a month, then decide if you're grateful." But she was smiling as she said it, and Sarah smiled back, tentative and hopeful. Inside the kitchen, Mara showed her around. The stove, the storage, the supplies, the routines. Sarah took it all in with hungry attention, the look of someone who'd been given a lifeline and intended to hold on tight. "You'll sleep in the back room there," Mara said, pointing. It's small, but it's warm. Meals are at 5:30, noon, and 6. You help me prep and cook and clean. Between meals, you do what needs doing. Any questions?
Why did you hire me? Sarah asked quietly. You don't know me. Don't know if I'm any good. Mara thought about that first night, walking 8 miles in the snow because she had nowhere else to go. Thought about Rowan giving her a chance when no one else would. Thought about everything that had happened since. Someone gave me a chance when I needed one, she said. Seemed right to do the same. I won't let you down. See that you don't. Over the following weeks, Sarah proved her worth. She wasn't as skilled as Mara, but she was willing to learn, and she worked without complaint. The crew accepted her the way they'd accepted Mara, judging her on what she did, not what she looked like. Watching Sarah find her footing, Mara felt something shift inside her. She'd been the one who needed rescue. Now she was the one providing it. The circle completing itself in the best possible way. Winter came hard that year, snow piling up and temperatures dropping below zero for days at a time. But the ranch was ready. Supplies laid in, buildings fortified, routines established. They weathered the cold together, crew and partners and new addition, bound together by shared purpose. On the longest night of the year, they gathered in the main house for dinner. Mara and Sarah had spent all day cooking, roasted goose, potatoes, bread, pie, everything good they could manage. The crew ate until they couldn't move, then sat around the fire telling stories. Rowan raised his glass. To the walking H, to surviving what should have killed us, and to everyone here who made that possible. To the walking H, they chorused. Mara sat back and looked around the room. At Briggs with his gray beard and dry humor, at Miller and Temple and Sykes. At Sarah, still new but finding her place. At Rowan, partner and friend and the man who'd seen past every judgment the world had rendered. This was family, not blood, but chosen. Not perfect, but real. She'd walked 8 miles in the snow for this, had fought a banker's vendetta, had stood in front of a town that didn't want her and refused to disappear, and she'd won. Not just the ranch, not just the job, but a place in the world that was hers by right, a voice that couldn't be silenced, a home where she didn't have to shrink to fit. She'd spent a lifetime being told she was too much, too big, too rough, too different. Turned out she was exactly right. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell and the mountains stood eternal. Inside, the fire crackled and the crew laughed, and Mara Vance sat in the home she'd fought for and felt, for the first time in her life, completely at peace. She'd found her place, and she was never letting go.